I want to welcome everyone back to this continuing journey, I'd like to say, on race, culture, and the church. And this is the second conversation that I am honored to have with three individuals that are involved in law enforcement. But more important than being involved in law enforcement, they are followers of Jesus Christ. Todd, Brent, and Kionna. And as I shared on the prior podcast, videocast, and I encourage you, if you haven't watch that before you go too much further with this. It will give better context for our conversation. But as I shared, we are followers of Jesus Christ, and we happen to be engaged in various tent making endeavors. Civil engineer, law enforcement, doctors, lawyers, accountants, garbage collectors. But who we are is who we profess. And so we had, I should just share too. Todd is with Celtic Presbyterian in Carmichael. Brent is with St. John's Lutheran in Sacramento, and Kionna, as well as myself, are with City Church of Sacramento. So we have, we're coming from even different spiritual backgrounds, if you will, church history backgrounds. So again, the common thread, the link, the blood that binds us together is that of Jesus Christ. A lot has happened since we, I think Todd mentioned that when I sent out the reminder to everyone. It's like, okay, we're coming up on our next video cast. A lot has happened, and it's like Groundhog Day. You know, things continue to be the same. I think it's Albert Einstein that said it's the definition of insanity to continue to do the same thing again and again and expect a different outcome. And I think over the arc of time, whatever arc you want to use, that's one of the things that we've continued to do. And there's an incident, there's protestation, there's any number of blue ribbon committees and what have you, and things seem to die down, or we move on to the next episode of the Kardashians, and then we go about life, whatever that is, however we define it, until the next thing. And we continue to do that. And then we wonder why things are unchanged. I wanna follow up on our last conversation, and really, and in no apparent order. I'm just looking at my screens, Todd, Brent, and Kionna. So maybe we just go with that rhythm. How have you approached? You all, I'm not putting words in your mouth. You have professed Christ. You are, as best we do, we are trying to follow hard after that Jewish rabbi, the Son of God. We're trying to follow hard after him. How are you doing? How have you done with sharing your faith, making your faith known to your peers, either explicitly or implicitly? If I could be that metaphorical fly on the wall and enter in onto one of your team meetings, would I hear Christ? Would I see Christ? Or might I see Peter as he was confronted by the young lady and say, "You're one of him. You're with him." No, I'm not. No, I'm not. So anyway, that's a long intro, and I've asked my question. So Todd, how are you sharing your faith? How have you shared your faith with your peers? Those you serve, your peers.
It's a really good question. When I look back at how I share my faith with my peers, I'm more, I don't know the best way to describe it, but it's more subtle. I'm not going around and Bible thumping my peers, but I have bumper stickers on my truck, right? Real men love Jesus. I listen to K-Love. When I'm out on calls, it doesn't matter which peers are with me, but I'll offer prayer. When I'm talking with my trainees one-on-one, I get to know them as an individual. Who are you? How old are you? Are you married? Are you single? Do you have kids? Are you divorced? Where are you in life? What'd you do before this? Right. A lot of times it's religion comes up. Politics and religion often comes up. And those are two things you're supposed to not talk about, but I'm not afraid of hard conversations. So it's just getting to know people, letting them know, hey, I'm here. I wear my cross outside of my black t-shirt, right, when I'm working out or something. So people around me know that I'm faith-based. And I've actually had a couple officers come up during the protests. We're in a lull or something, and it's like, I had a motor officer come up to me and is like, hey, I know you're a Christian. Let's talk. And so we struck up this conversation. And so, yeah, when I look at things, I know years ago, I think last time I mentioned, I was at a men's retreat and I challenged myself to be more open back at work. And there's still room for improvement, right? I'm just now figuring out that I might want to promote to a sergeant position. So then there's that opportunity of having now a team, right? And I would love to pray for a team with my team on a regular basis. I think that would be super impactful. And if I can pray with people that I'm arresting, why can't I pray with my coworkers? My beat partner for years, we pray together. So yeah, it's out there, but it's not Bible thumping, pushing it. It's more subtle, right? I like to kind of just plant those seeds and let them grow in their time, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. Have you seen you planting the seeds? Have you seen a harvest?
I have with a couple of my old trainees that have gone out solo. A couple of them have come back and kind of given me feedback on, hey, I remember that time where you prayed with so-and-so and that was really impactful on me. And now I'm kind of doing something a little different, or I'll put on K-Love when we're taking somebody to jail and it'll open up that conversation. So I think it's over time. There's little bits, and there's probably a bunch that I don't realize, right? And those are just that's just me having faith that we're having positive impact on others. And
you happen to be first, and so you, Brent and Kionna, you can expect the same conversation. But I have one more question for you, Todd. Have you seen a transformation in you?
In me?
In you?
Yeah. I mean, over the years, I've throughout my career, I've been doing this for 18 years. I've gone through phases in my career, much like you have phases in life, right? Based on your age and where you are and your maturity. And in the last few years, yes, absolutely. There's been more of a change in myself, in my attitude towards policing. And it's more of a growth, instead of the younger kind of, I don't want to say reckless, but more proactive policing that I used to do in my younger days, where I would go out and just try to handle the calls and go to the next one and just put a Band-Aid on the problem and move on. Now it's really kind of digging a little bit deeper, taking my time with the call. Unless something priority comes out, I'm focused on one call at a time. And that person has my time for however long it takes, really.
Brent, you've been around the block more than once. You've been blessed to be retired, to have retired from law enforcement, but I'm sure your tentacles, your roots still permeate the agencies that you've been a part. How is, same questions, that I asked of Todd. How open, have you been sharing your faith? Have you seen what type of reaction or growth that you've seen in others as well as yourself?
Much like Todd, I was probably more of a subtle approach to it. I know that, from my upbringing and stuff, I was always taught that you do the right thing, whether or not you're always the outcome of what your actions are right. It was, wasn't anything that was ever done unintentionally as far as I can tell. However, I think that over the years of either working when I was on patrol or as a supervisor and as a manager, I've had the opportunity to talk to people that have come and said, hey, you are different. You spend more time talking to people and allowing them to talk. Why do you do that? You take your arrestees and you spend time talking to them and giving them an opportunity, whereas you should just ignore them, put them in jail and move on. And through those conversations, then it was more of I need to treat people correctly. And my beliefs, and as people would ask questions, then I would be more willing to share. As I became a supervisor and you become more intimately known with the people that you're working with, you start to understand a little bit more of their family dynamics. You're involved in some of their misdeeds, or you're holding them accountable for something that they may have done or may not have done. You start to understand those dynamics, and then as you begin those conversations, and starting to recognize that there is a faith base somewhere in their past, then those doors open up. Say, listen, have you gone back to talk to a pastor? Do you have somebody from your church that you can talk with? So that started to open up some doors. I have some great friends now that text me from time to time, even though I'm no longer there, and they say, hey, I got involved in this. Do you have time to talk? So that kind of approach of initially being less than in people's faces about it, but more acting in the appropriate manner and holding myself accountable to a standard of living. I had a good friend that retired, and he came up and told me, say, listen, you're probably the most squared away person I've ever known. And I said, Rich, I'm not. I says, I just put on that armor and understand that if I have to hold other people accountable, I have to hold myself accountable. Well, where does that come from? And, I had to share with him. I says, well, it comes from my upbringing. It comes from my faith background. It's from my beliefs. I do make mistakes. You just don't see that because I hold myself accountable, or I'll go in and talk to whoever I'm supposed to report to say, listen, hey, I made this mistake. And, the same thing with supervisors and managers that I worked with, they always kind of understood that, if I'm walking in their office to tell them something, then I'm being forthright with them. So that was kind of always my approach, was, holding myself accountable. There were times where I had to be held accountable, and I'd always sit there and listen. Initially, it's very hard to be held accountable from something that you think you've done right. However, as you sit back and analyze those situations, I would say, yep, they're right. It's myself that has to be held accountable in this situation, and thank you for doing that. I had the And this came out of nowhere for me too. I had a young woman that I was associated with. I was working, but she wasn't working directly for me. And she contacted me one day. She said, "Hey, my grandmother just committed suicide. And I know you're religious. Can you help me?" And I remember looking at her going, "Who told you that? Because I don't even know you." And she said, "Well, the people that you work with have told me that you've helped them. Can you help me?" And she and I have become very good friends. She struggled through a lot of things and ultimately ended up getting married and having a very happy life. And so it's been very rewarding for me on that standpoint of thinking, you know what, I really never really intentioned to be in people's faces about it, but I would be willing to be there to help them through things. So
have you, I want to, boy, oh boy, there's so much you shared that I'd like to unpack, but I want to ask this one question. I like how you put holding yourself accountable. Have you ever experienced holding yourself accountable to a different level of accountability when the system or your peers or the rules said you performed, you did appropriately by the letter of the law, but something, dare I say, the Holy Spirit may have tugged at your heart and said, "Brent, that was a swing and a miss." Have you ever had anything like that?
I think that I don't necessarily can't really pull anything out of context there on that. I think that there have been times where after I sat back and recognized as to why did I react in that manner when my peers may have acted differently. I think I've had my peers say, "Hey, how come you didn't just hit the person? Why didn't you just shoot the person?" And in my mind, I'm sitting there thinking, you know what? It didn't amount to that point in my mind. And I was ultimately able to negotiate through the circumstance. In my mind, I sit there and think, well, my protecting angel was there with me. An incident where I had an arrest where we were going down the path of force. And in my mind, I knew that people were coming to help me. All I needed to do at this point in time was mitigate that period of time through conversation, through placing the person in a position where I can control them, not necessarily physically, but in spatial. And I mean, in my mind, I thought, you know what, ultimately this is going to be a fight, which is going to amount into some degree of injury on myself or himself or force that could be used. And all I was hoping is that I would be able to get my help there fast enough so that this person could recognize that, hey, this path that we're heading down is not going to be a good path for him. And ultimately it works. Now, would I have been faulted for taking other appropriate action within policy? Yes, I could have done that. But ultimately, the promises that I had made to my wife when I came into law enforcement, which was that I would do the best job that I possibly could and still come home and be here for the family, I had to make those decisions to say, listen, you know what? Yeah, I'm capable and I'm willing. However, it's easier for me to get assistance there to do what I need to do. So, and that was one of the things too we always had with my beat partners was, hey, listen, you know what? When we make the traffic stop or the stop or the contact, you need to put out your position so that we know where you're at and that we can start rolling at least in that direction so that we can help each other.
Thank you, Brent. Kionna, same questions again. You've recently promoted to sergeant. I don't know if that's changed the dynamic much in the situation you're in, but how open have you been with sharing your faith with your peers and who you've engaged with, and what type of transformation, if any, have you seen in yourself as you move through your career?
I think I would have to agree with both Todd and Brent in that I initially was more subtle. Now I wouldn't say that I feel like I'm bold, but I'm still subtle. I'm not a Bible thumper either at work. However, I will say that um, being kind of over a team, like Brent said, it allows me into their personal lives sometimes, even if you don't want to be, just because they'll share things with you. They're having some difficulties at home. And so I've been able to have inlets that way by the way I talk to them and letting them know. I'll just say, well, I'm going to pray for you. And I'm going to, letting them know that it's okay. And then I have found that more people than not are believers, and they're kind of quiet as well, and they don't share it. So it's like, oh, but they are Christians or whatever. They have some sort of faith that they hold on to, and they're now free, or they feel comfortable to express it as well. I've had people at work. I know when I started we had a unit at the jail when I first promoted that I was leading, and I was a little bit nervous about it because it was all new territory for me, but I knew I wanted to do it. And one of the social workers that I was going to be working with knew a friend of mine. So it was like day 1 or 2. And we kind of met up when we were leaving near the locker room. And she asked if she could pray with me. Can I pray with you? I know that you're a Christian. I wanted to pray. And I'm all, absolutely. So we kind of tucked away in this little room at the main jail, and we just held hands and prayed. And it was kind of awkward initially. I'm like, oh my, someone's going to walk in here. And it was just a little awkward. But I have found that more people than not actually are, and perhaps they're kind of holding it in, or I don't even want to say living in secret, just because they don't want to sadly offend people or get in trouble, air quotes. So, but in terms of me seeing transformation with others, I can't say that I have. I know that I allow part of my outside world to come in. I know that Rochelle Dittmore, and we were out at the protest. We got called in every Sunday for the last few weeks. We've been having to go, downtown and with mutual aid. And so I was there with my team. We had to man the DA's office, and I told a friend, she's like, Kionna, where are you going to be? And I'm like, oh, we'll be downtown. And around 11 o'clock at night, maybe 10 o'clock at night, I see this little 5'2" girl and her 2 little friends, and Rochelle Dittmore with her crew, and they are just praying through the fence. And they just started praying, and my team's like, who's this crazy lady praying for us? And I said, that's my girl. So I went up to her, and we're just kind of touching hands to the fence because, the fence was obviously a barrier, but they got to see. I'm like, yeah, that's my friend. She prays for us, and I pray for us, and so that we're safe out here. And they just look at me like I'm crazy because I'm the only girl on the team, but whatever. So, I just live my life, and I feel like people, again, I think we said that last time, people crave it, they want it, and they don't really know how to be when they see it. It's like, whoa, that is weird, but I like it, and I one thing, and I was talking to my husband, it's like, just be you. You come into a space, and it's like, how do you get to make a dent in the place that you were sent, if you will? How do you get to impact, and how do you and you think it's like, well, how do I want to make sure I'm not to this, or make sure, but I just be me, and it works, and just you make connections with people. I just got this amazing letter from a call almost 2 years ago, and it was read in our briefing. It really surprised me on Wednesday and brought tears to my eyes. My captain read it, and I thought, oh my gosh, and he's standing before everybody talking about this person that he's going to talk about. And I'm like, I wonder who he's going to talk about. And then it was me. I'm like, what? And it was just so cool to know a call on the American River. We were doing a project with the Rangers, and this lady it was just an amazing call. She was being beat by her boyfriend. She was lived in a tent in a wheelchair. She was paralyzed. And anyway, she's now thriving. The guy went to prison for 7 years. She's, going back to school. She's got a little roommate now, and she's thriving. And I just thought, what an amazing story. But for her, I was able to help her. And I just thought I was doing my job, but it was really touching, just by being kind. And it was a long time. I spent a long time on that call. Like you were saying, Todd, one call at a time. There's really unless something exigent comes out, you can put your heart in it. And people just see it. People see, your light, so anyway, that's kind of my spiel about that. I don't know that I've had transformation, but I've definitely been able to plant seeds.
This is a tee up, I guess. Again, the killing of George Floyd, again, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake, Daniel Prude. I look at these as horrific as I view them, as troubling as I view them. The engagements, to me, they are symptoms. They are canaries in the coal mine. As they say, what's the canary in the coal mine? It's the canary was used to determine if the oxygen level in the mine was dangerously low. Sadly, it depends on the perspective. The canary would die first before the person if oxygen levels drop too low. And I see these incidents as canaries in the coal mine, that they reflect a level of brokenness, a serious level of brokenness that really speaks to our humanity. And as believers, as faithful Christ followers, you are in a very challenging position, one that you chose, but nonetheless is freighted with incredible challenge. So the issue of life becomes then, how do I exist in this environment, and not just exist, but Christ promised, he said, I've come to give you life, and not just life, live it out 70 years best you can, but I've come to give you abundant life. And it is it's an incredible it's an incredible challenge, and it's an incredible thing that has to be addressed in terms, again, if we're not careful, we'll look at it and it becomes we can almost just wilt under the weight of the issue, feeling that we have to fix it. We have to fix the entire problem. I like how you put it, and Todd, you set it off again in terms of dealing with one situation at a time, one engagement at a time. So the issues have festered since Uncle Adam and Auntie Eve were placed on the earth, and have gotten worse. They haven't gotten better. But my question to you all now is, what are you prepared to do about it? What not theoretically, but tangibly, what are you prepared to do about it? What do you see your role tangibly to change the arc of history, if you will? So I'm back to you, Todd.
So there's a lot in what you just said. I firmly believe throughout my years When I go to calls and I'm investigating a crime, I've discovered that there's three sides to every story, right? Say I respond to a domestic violence. I'm going to get his side, I'm going to get her side, and then there's a third side of what really happened. Two people have two different perceptions. To go back and answer the simple, it's not a simple question, but to answer the direct question of what am I prepared to do? I'm prepared to carry on and rise to the challenge and make sure that my actions, and I hold myself responsible to make sure that everything, that my actions and my decisions are legal, moral, and ethical. And that was something that was said by my chief in our academy on family night. Hey, if your actions and your decisions are legal, they follow the law, they're moral, and they're ethical, we're going to support your decisions. And so to kind of blend the two, there's three sides to every story, and my decision making. I think a lot of it is education. Okay. I think a lot of it is perspective. I think the people that you named, I don't really see them as canaries. I think there has to be, it's not all, the responsibility doesn't all fall on law enforcement, I guess is the simple way to put it. I don't think it's all on law enforcement to fix this. I think we need to have the best training. I think we need to be held responsible, which we are. We're held accountable by our actions. And if policies need to change because of something that's wrong, then we need to fix it. And we're always struggling. We're always changing. Just in my career alone, policies have changed. We've updated policies. We've gotten rid of policies. We've gotten rid of some, just recently the carotid control hold, right? We're no longer allowed to use that, right? Because of the perception or whatnot. I actually have never used it in my career, but I've seen it used. It's an effective tool, but it's also very dangerous. So force is never a pretty thing, no matter what level. And it's a difficult job. And I think what I'm prepared to do is continue to rise to the challenge in a legal, moral, and ethical manner, and continue to pray and share God's word. I mean, as much as I can, really. I think this world in general is getting away from God, and I think a lot of it is suffering. But I think everyone needs to have some level of responsibility, and that's including the people who police officers are contacting, and it's done thousands of times a day across this country. That people have the respect for law enforcement and their authority, they comply, and they go through the process. That's our legal system. But is, getting up in front of police officers' face and yelling at them, that's not the time and place to argue about their decisions. And it's a shame I get the feeling out in the streets that people feel enabled to do that, and it'll make a difference in our decisions. No, we have a job to do. And it's a dangerous and a very difficult job. And there's a lot. I could talk forever on this.
I see you.
There's so many different rabbit trails to go down. And I think, I have a huge respect for life, right? All life. And there's so many different ways to go down this topic. And
there is you brought up a lot, and you brought up a lot, not the least of which is when you use legal, moral, and ethical. And as I like to challenge folks, the more you interact with me, the more you'll know I'll push. It was legal, it was moral, and it was ethical at one time in this country to have slaves. It was legal, it was moral, and it was ethical. Who defines what's ethical? Who defines what's moral? Legal kind of figured that out. So that's why I push us as professing faithful believers of Jesus Christ. Does Caesar define what I do? Or does, and Christ has already answered the question for us. You can't serve both. Pick one.
Right.
Pick one. And that's why I asked, I'll be more explicit now and less subtle, before, in terms of how you made, I guess I asked Brent this question, the decisions you've made, have you been given, I won't say a pat on the back, but it's like, no, it fit within the protocols of what we're called to do, but I've been called to a higher protocol. I've been called to a higher authority. So it may be right, but it's not right. It may be okay, but it's not okay. We're continuing our discussion. For those of you who are watching, well, it's all videotape. For those of you who are watching on video, it was a 4-hour pause, shall we say, and Todd's answer. And now I want to turn the same question over to Brent and Kionna. Again, the question on the table is, what are we prepared to do about it? As Todd, spoke, his supervisors were sharing, the basis of your action must be, as officers of the law, legal, moral, and ethical. As I shared, it used to be the majority held that it was moral to hold slaves. It was moral. It was moral to have separate and equal. But one of the things that I've come to understand about morality, at least two things. One, morality has to be immutable. What's moral today should be moral tomorrow and should be moral next week. Otherwise, it becomes opinion, or it becomes majority or mob rule. So it has to be immutable, but it's kind of like, though, how when God chased Uncle Adam and Auntie Eve out of the garden, it's like, oh, we can't have you in a sinful state now partake of the tree of life. That would perpetuate something that we don't want to have, we being God. We can't have that. So morality has to be immutable, and it has to be based on righteousness. So, and one more, as always, I guess it's the preacher in me. It's always one more. I was sharing with someone just this past week ago. Yeah. I said, you need to stop going to broken people for answers. Broken people can't go to broken people and hope to get a whole answer. That's a problem. I know. Well, we're all broken. I get that. But there are degrees of brokenness that we look to various institutions, people, and expect righteousness or morality from them. And it's like, well, what do you expect to get? You know, just seriously, what do you expect to get? So that's enough. And hopefully, again, Brent and Kionna, you've had the benefit of 4 hours to ponder Todd's answers and my question. So Brent, what do you say? What are you prepared to do about it, and speak to the issue of the moral, ethical, and legal behavior? You're an officer of the law, but you're a Christ follower. Square those circles. So.
Well, first of all, it's a very difficult question to answer, and I fully agree with everything that Todd has put forth. He did a good job at laying that out. You know, as an individual, I have to first of all say that I don't condone, you know, that the actions of officers that go beyond their legal, moral authority. I know that officers make mistakes, and I know that, and I can tell you that I too have biases that have been developed in my life. Long story short, I was born in Madagascar. I spent 9 years of my life in Madagascar while my parents worked in the mission field. The first friends I had were Malagasy people. We lived among them. Everything was, in my young life, there was no difference between them and myself. 9 years old, I moved to Los Angeles, and I'm introduced to an American school. On the playground, I am told I can't play with those people. We don't play with those people. And I am flabbergasted. I don't understand what do you mean by those people? And so there's where I am introduced to what the American society is. Fortunately for us, we moved to Sacramento, and I was in a community growing up for the rest of my young into adulthood in a community where I didn't feel that type of tension in the schools, in my friends, or anything else, until I became law enforcement. And I have to say that probably the biggest struggle probably with me in law enforcement is not only dealing in an enforcement capacity with what we consider a minority community, as well as dealing on a supervisor and a managerial level with individuals who felt that they had to throw the race card in anytime a derogatory or a negative action was incurred. It wasn't a matter of, hey, I'm dealing with an issue. It's a, hey, you're only doing this because this is who I am. So I have to admit that I have a degree of biases. I have to go all the way back to when I first started in law enforcement. I had a very good mentor that told me, Brent, you need to have guarded trust with everybody you deal with. And to me, that guarded trust is that I meet you at the same level that you want to be treated and the way I would like to be treated. And it didn't matter across the board whether it was an enforcement action, whether it was dealing with my peers, whether I was dealing in a supervisor role or even as a manager role. It's that we are in God's image. We were created in God's image. He loves every single one of us. We all come together as individuals with different paths in life. And every one of us brings something to the table. Some people, you know, as you're a supervisor and as you're working together, some people bring less in our opinions, and we have to be able to guard ourselves from taking a critical eye at that, as long as they're performing at the best capable level that they can, based upon their training, their experience, so on and so forth. So I have to admit, I'm biased. I have yet to come across probably any individual out there that has a bias in some manner towards something that either they felt they were wronged, or that there's something that's causing them some kind of a, some pain. So it's a very difficult world. I think that probably the best for all of us is that you, and I don't know if there's an answer to all of this. I know that we as people have to start returning to a standard, like you said, of morality. What is acceptable, morals acceptable in this world? And then we have to guard that. People have to start recognizing what is right and what is wrong. I told my pastor one day, we were talking about security measures at our church. And there's some pushback because churches want everybody to feel welcome. I made a statement in the process of talking with the council, and it was ignorance on my part, laziness on my part. I made a statement that those people that don't belong here have to be watched. And I stirred it. And it wasn't and I had to go back and clarify my statement. It says, those people that intend to do harm have to be identified before they can cause harm. And that's what law enforcement, I mean, a proactive effort in law enforcement is going into the community and protecting the community from those people that intend to do harm. And yet we still have to recognize that those people that are doing harm are also God's children.
Shared before, share now. It's difficult for folks to wrap their mind around, but it's nonetheless true. As I shared with someone, it's like, you don't have to believe scripture for it to be true. It just is. It's true. It's immutable. God loves the Jeffrey Dahmers of the world just as much as he loves the Mark Meekses. No less. No less.
We tend to shun those people. And that's when you answer this question, like I said, I agree. I have had benefit in my life. I had a family, a very strong family that taught me what was right and wrong. We didn't have much. There were 6 kids in my family, and we were told, we will provide what we can for you. If you want something else, you have to get a job and provide for yourself. More and above of what we can provide for you. So, and when we did wrong, we were held accountable. When we spoke out, and God forbid we were not nice to our parents ensured that they understood that they were the authority. So I think that a lot of that has to come back into our society, that the whole family of people taking care of people and instilling these boundaries and these guidelines in people's lives. And as individuals, we have to learn that we are fallible, and we have to accept our own shortcomings and decide whether those shortcomings are something that we have to correct, or are we just going to live with them? That's who we are.
I also want to keep us challenged though too, because this is a conversation. The header is race, culture, and the church.
Yes.
I'm not there. We become the salt to the meat, to the entree, if you will. We are that. We are the difference makers. But I'm not trying to go down that path of moral correction to folks that aren't believers.
Yes,
let's speak about
and I know
us.
I know I probably went a little bit off the topic, but it's a foundation to understand that as an individual, and what am I going to do? I'm going to continue to promote that to those people that listen. It's in my church community, because there's brokenness in the church community, to my friends, to those people that I'm still friends with, that I don't have close contact with, but that have had the same conversations. How do we as law enforcement change it? Some of them are reaching out and doing things because they have a pulpit, and encouraging them to continue with the work that they're doing and working with the young people, because the next generation, we have to change their attitudes. The new coming generation, we have a, already our makeup is here. We can make some changes, but the new generation has to start to recognize that we have to make some changes in how we approach each other and live together as individuals.
Kionna, it's a lot to digest. There's a lot to unpack and present. But if anybody can do it, I know you can. So with that,
and we're looking forward to it.
That's it. What do you say? Again, what are we prepared to do? What are you, not we, what are you prepared to do about it? And speak to the issues of legal, moral, ethical, life lived in uniform.
Well, it's a lot. And I think, first off, I'm a Black female. Surprise, surprise, in law enforcement. And I will say that with the current times we're in, I'm at an intersection of who I am as a person and what I do. And so I'm a Black woman. I go home to a Black husband. I have Black cousins, Black family who are law enforcement, who have stories to tell that break me when I hear the stories. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That happened? Like, what? And I'm not remiss. I would be remiss in saying that if I weren't in uniform, I could be treated, the same way perhaps. And I know I can distinctly remember crossing, is it 7th Street? I was headed to the sheriff's office and our headquarters, and I was in uniform. And the light had just turned. It told me, the little walking hand told me to walk, but it said walk, but then all of a sudden the flashing hand said stop. So I was in the middle of the road when it said that, and a truck was turning, and he yells out, "Can't you read, you nigger?" And I thought, oh my goodness, I was in a uniform, and this man drove by, and it blew me away. I couldn't believe it. Like, it was like I had no respect in uniform. It didn't matter. And it cut me for a second. I'm like, are you kidding me? I just couldn't believe it. I say that to say, when I look at all of the videos that we're seeing, and I know that media is telling in that we're not going to see the cool, amazing things that we do daily. I know this is I'm not even going to say it's an anomaly, because I don't know if I believe it, but I will say, when I watched the Daniel Prude recently, my captain showed it in briefing, and it just really shocked the conscience for me. And the first thing I thought was, what if one of them just did the right thing? Just one of them just said, hey guy, you're naked. Can we get a blanket? Let me get you a blanket. Let me get you a blanket. You're cuffed. Let me get you a blanket. I'm not trying to Monday morning quarterback, but I say that because I've seen a lot of situations that I've seen that a law enforcement finds himself in. And if you take it back and break it down, of course, after, you'll see, gosh, it could have gone a whole nother way if we just did this. Or me as a Black officer, and I'm in the mix of it, and I see even my deputies, I'm on calls, and we had an SCD call up the other day, and this Black kid, took us on a full chase. We had a beautiful perimeter, and he's hiding. It took us 4 hours to find him. We had SCD on the call for other reasons, but they were there helping. And finally he comes out. He's an arborist. He was a tree arborist, kind of interesting. And he was in a tree the whole time watching us with our drones and watching us do what we do. And finally he decided to come out. He was tired, and he comes out. And of course, all the deputies are angry. He gets in the car, and we had his family on scene because they were on the phone with him as he was telling them, hey, come pick me up. This is where I am. And they were giving us intel like, hey, he's in there, because they didn't want to get hurt. So he comes out, and we're in the house now as he's already in the back of the car. And my officers ask, hey, can we, he wants water. He wants water, Sarge. Can we give him water? And it kind of bothered me. It's like, gosh, that's the right thing to do. Give the man water. He wants water. Why wouldn't you give him water? And it just occurred to me that not everybody, I think sometimes we get one-sided and we get focused on the enforcement piece and we lose the human piece. We lose the compassion that every officer, I would submit, said they wanted to do. I'm just here to help people. I just want to help people. And somehow along the way, it's gotten lost in our judgments, in us being angry about what they did, what they caused us, you know, all these things. And we lose sight of still, okay, what's the point and purpose? And so I guess I say all that to say in a long roundabout way of saying, what can I do? What will I do? The next right thing, the next right thing. And I think that if you do that and you stand with others and they see that, they follow suit. We could save a lot of hurt and harm. If I look at George Floyd, if one of the officers that stood by just did the next right thing, hey bro, tap him on the shoulder and say, hey, get up. He's cuffed. Let's go. Let's get up. He's not a danger. Get him up. What would we have now? Would it have been different? So if we can stand in the face of others and have the courage, just as Christians do, we have to stand in the face of others, walk boldly. And there's definitely a culture in law enforcement. There's definitely a culture. I'm not saying, you know, and I just think that we have to choose the right, if you will, and whatever that looks like, whatever face we lose or save, and I say saving face in that regard, we have to do the next right thing regardless. Yes, our policies allow us to do a lot of stuff, but just because we can doesn't mean we should. And so it's like, okay, we have the authority, I can write this up and I would be justified, but do we have to? And I think if we think in that way, because I just see me as a Black person, when I come to certain calls, the way I can connect and infiltrate and change up and talk to people like, hey, you have the power to change this contact right there on the thing. Like, look at how you're acting. We had a guy the other day on a call. He jumps out before he was even pulled over. And he's mad. And he's walking to my officer's car. I mean, my officer was scared. And luckily it worked out. But I get to the scene. I'm like, what is your problem? Who does that? You guys kill Black people. I said, you know what? That's ridiculous. I hear what you're saying. But why not, if you have a problem with us, handle it the right way. In the streets right now, trying to come at us like this is going to get you killed. You need to, if you have a problem, take it to IA. Do it the right way. And so I talk to people. We have a wonderful program called Why'd You Stop Me? It's out of Long Beach PD. It's Jason Lehman. He's a wonderful white guy, actually. Not actually, I don't want to say that as if there's not, but he's a PD there. He created this amazing program. He's going all around the country, taking it into the community about why'd you stop me? But it's allowing people of color, just minorities, whatever that looks like, to be able to have these conversations and how to really act on a stop and educating them how you behave, because there are a lot of, anti-law enforcement organizations that teach kids at a young age. I'm talking in preschool. And what you look at Seattle, Portland, they have these organizations that teach these babies, police are bad. You know, at 4 and 5, they're bad. Don't talk to them. They will hurt you. And so they come up at a young age. So we're getting a community and a population and a generation of people who don't respect authority, who don't respect law enforcement. And we have to undo that. But like you said, we talk about salt and light. We are salt and light. We are first believers. We happen to be law enforcement officers. So in this community of law enforcement professionals, we have to, even within that subculture, choose the right and do the next right thing and have the courage to just be the one that does the right thing and saves our officers. We have a duty to intervene when we see things that are awry, when we see things going down a path. And it's just a simple little changing of, like, if you were driving a boat, just changing it a little bit. Hey, tap him on the shoulder. Hey, let's get this guy a blanket. If there's no blankets, we could have knocked on the apartments. There's plenty of people. Knock on a homeowner's door. Hey, do you have a blanket? I can get this guy. He's out here. He's naked and it's raining. They would be happy to get a blanket. And if Daniel Prude still died in that, my goodness, it would look so good that they got him a blanket, that they covered him up, they showed him modesty, that they were talking to him, that they were giving him water, and he still died of excited delirium, but at least it didn't show that they were just looking at him die. It shocked the conscience, but I could go on. And so I say, what can we do? Just the next right thing, and have the courage to be the one that stands up and says, hey, we can do that, but maybe it's not the right thing. We can calm this guy down another way. We can do some other things. Yeah, we have the authority to do so, but hey, let's think about some other options, and I think we'll save each other by doing that. So I don't know. That's all I got.
It's quite a bit, actually.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd agree. Very well said.
Anything you want to, well, go ahead, Brent, Todd, do you want to respond back to what was just said before I go on to?
Well, I really liked Kionna's point about police as a culture.
Yeah.
And, you know, you look over history and that culture has changed. It's evolved, right? You think of the old time cops in the 20s, you know, walking their beat, right? They swinging their billy clubs around, right? And that culture has evolved, much like our country has evolved. You know, you said at one point that slavery was legal, ethical, and moral. Thankfully, I had 4 hours to kind of think about that. You challenged me, and it really kind of initially caught me off guard. So I'm kind of thankful that I had that little break to think about it. And you asked a really important question of who decides. You know, morality is basically, in a nutshell, it's who decides what's right, what's wrong, right? Well, slavery was viewed at one point as being okay, and legal and moral and ethical, but there was more to it. It was deeper. It was profitable. It was popular. It was accepted culturally. And it took a lot of time and evolution to change. So how did that change? How did that shift? Who decided that it was no longer legal, moral, or ethical? And I think it's just that evolution, that we're all imperfect and we're all growing.
It took a civil war.
It took a civil war, right?
To change that.
And there are a lot of topics that, you know, you look back through history, there's a lot of topics that are just, people are just so passionate about one way or another, right? And we look back and we think, you know, how could people back then do what they did, right? And be the way that they were. And you know, another lifetime from now, because that was before my lifetime, right? Another lifetime from now, people might look back at today and say, how could people do this or think this way? And so it's that evolution. And I think a lot of it comes to training. A lot of it comes to difficult conversations. And we're all evolving. You know, our culture as a police department, as police officers, our career is evolving. It's changing. And you can either fight it or embrace it and change with it. And when I was a rookie, we didn't even have cameras in our car. And I remember the older senior officers, when we put in-car cameras in our car with a VCR in the trunk, recording, you know, traffic stops and recording. We had a microphone that connected to it. That technology was amazing, right? We're like, oh, it's Big Brother trying to get us in trouble. And it's like, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, what are you hiding, right? So I was a younger officer and I was fine with it. And I embraced it. And it got me out of a lot of complaints, got me out of a lot of trouble. So yeah, it's the accountability that's making officers today better officers. And I think people in general need accountability. But it also goes both ways. And I'm kind of it's kind of a tough conversation, like you said earlier, Brent, when you said, you know, churches want to welcome everyone, but there are people who want to hurt us and we need to identify them, right? There's accountability of people who want to hurt the police department or police officers. And we need to identify them and protect ourselves. And when police officers are walking up to a car, we don't know if that's a person, how they're going to react. Like Kionna mentioned earlier, that example of very irate right off the bat, you know, whoa, what's going on? And it can be a scary situation. So it's not easy. It's not a simple answer, but there's an evolution, and there's learning to everything. So
I think one thing I think
embrace it.
when I think about, principled policing, and that's kind of all of the, the cry of the day, and you think about kind of some of the tenets of that. And when I think about legitimacy and law enforcement, and we get our legitimacy or consent, if you will, to govern really by the community. And so we have been made, we talk about evolution, we've been made to police in a different kind of way because the community has said enough. The community says, no, not, we don't need that kind of policing. We don't want that. And so now we have to check certain things, we have to check certain policies and the way we do business. Todd, I love, Chief Hahn came out with that article, and I know it's very controversial. I'm sure you've read it in response to our sheriff.
Yeah.
Gosh, they're on both sides of the coin. I would agree a lot with my sheriff. This has to stop. This has, you can't just go terrorizing people. And then you have the other side of the coin where it's like, okay, he comes and really wants to be more of a bridge builder than the heavy in a way. It's like, okay,
right.
And bridging, it's like, okay, we're going to bridge. It doesn't necessarily mean we agree. I hope that I don't get someone necessarily to take on my issue and to agree with me, but more to just hear me and respect and value the humanity that I am. Hear that's what I hear from the community when I feel like bridging. It's like, okay, I listen to you, you have a seat at the table. But I think more than anything, we've been called as law enforcement to now we have to police a different way, and we can either rise to it or we can keep on. And when you think about the numbers, I think about even our jail. We've got, gosh, I would say 250 officers at any given time, or no, total probably 50 shifts. You got 4 different shifts, and we have 2,000 inmates. If they wanted to take over, they could take over, or 200. That 1,000 can take over. And if you think about this whole big old world with the finite amount of officers that we have, they're only complying because out of obligation, I suppose. But they want to take over, like we're kind of seeing. It's like, whoa, I don't know. I just feel like we've reached an impasse now of what we're gonna do. Are we going to continue policing this way? While I agree, I get angry, and I'll just say this with my people who buck the system and don't comply a lot of the times, like don't comply. But then you have, did the chicken come before the egg? Which one came first? Why are they so angry because you did this? Well, we're doing this because you did this. And so it's like, so it's so, I don't think we'll ever reach koinonia and this perfect way of policing because we're in a fallen world where sin abounds, and we can only just do the next right thing. And, I don't know if it's going to ever be, I know I could say it's never going to be perfect. But I just hope that we're making the steps and taking those steps to try to make things just better. That's all I can say is better. I mean, my heart breaks too. It breaks for the community to be so broken, and it breaks that, I can't really do anything about it, but just do what I can in my little area that I inhabit,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's a lot.
We can all, as ministers of the gospel, law enforcement, medical educators, you can be overwhelmed by the magnitude of the challenge. As Jesus was telling his disciples after he had ministered to one person, happened to be a woman who happened to be, had a whole bunch of husbands and was living with a guy. And the interaction transformed her so much so that the whole town turned out to come see this guy. You got to see that, you need to meet this guy. He's different from everybody else. And when Jesus, when the people were coming out, Jesus' remarks to his disciples were, look out on the field, look at the harvest. It's there for it's like grapes for the plucking. It's right there. We are, I don't know if it's probably saying the same thing twice. I don't know if it's human nature or simple nature, but that's it's one of the same. We tend to go for, we deal with symptoms. We don't deal with the problem. That's what we do. We deal with symptoms, and if it's not, well, the problem is we need bigger guns. We need more guns. We need more money. We need whatever. It's like, this is, I'm sure you would agree, this is just not something that you can purchase your way out of. So again, and I want to respect our time. We're pushing on I think we're pushing past an hour now. But my challenge, and this definitely won't be our last conversation, but our challenge is to recognize the, I want to say, recognize that this is not, if this becomes so overwhelming, then even believers will just throw up their hands and say, well, you know what, let me just curl up in a corner, build a wall behind a gated community or whatever, and just wait for the eschaton. And that's not why we're called here. I am convinced we were not given 70 years plus or minus just to do the best we can, hope for the best, earn a great living, have a nice retirement, and then see Jesus. That is pretty thin when it comes to a life lived in honor of God. Last words for now. Boy, oh boy, I just like the word. I think you said it, Todd. Accountability. You're the man of the day right now. Kionna, accountability. Kionna, the next right thing. And I'll share what I'm paraphrasing, I'm sure, what Dr. King said. Protest is the voice of the unheard. So you have this conflation, and it's not someone else. The challenge is, it's not someone else that'll be the change. We have to be the change, specifically us as Christ followers, specifically you as Christ followers that wear badges and interact with the most broken of the broken in our community. You deal with you get the car stopped, and that could be a doctor, it could be anybody, but you have a very good chance of dealing with those that, as the world would look at it, it's like, I got nothing to lose. What? I got nothing to lose. And so that's who you're interacting with. I can't think of, I'd rather have someone who is a Christ follower dealing with these gnarly situations than someone who is broken. And then that's when you get this toxic explosion, if you will. Last words, Brent. Last words. Any
Well, I'd like to say thank you to Mark as well as Todd and Kionna. That this is the type of conversation that needs to be brought forth, is for people to understand that we do have things to fix, and together we can do it. People can change. It takes an addict has to hit bottom before they get better.
That's right.
And then they have to want to get better. And I think that Christians are that force that can reach through the hurt and the pain to show that there is salvation. There is a better life, no matter where we are and what we're dealing with.
Yeah. Todd?
Final words for me. I think there's so much accountability that needs to be recognized on all sides. This problem is not going to be solved just by changing police. It's very much like a community-oriented policing theory, right? It takes effort of the community and the police, and we need to have these conversations, like Brent was saying. I love the fact that you pointed out that Mark, you would rather have a follower of Christ out there than somebody who's broken. And it reminded me, this whole conversation is reminding me of this morning's devotion, 1 Corinthians 10:31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. That was my devotion this morning, and totally applies to this conversation. Do it for the glory of God. Get that man a blanket for the glory of God, right? And if we can just remember that on both sides, not just the police officers, but the people who police officers are interacting with, this world would be a better place.
Amen. Kionna, last words.
Gosh, I really, I think it's important to really contemplate and think on how we even got to this space, why these protests have happened, the actual incident itself, not the George Floyd itself, not the Daniel Prude itself, but really the precipitating factors that led us here. That, I think, is super important. Here, why we leave it in this space, so that we can understand, so we can know how to not do that. I think that there's definitely accountability on both sides. I think that being said, somebody has to start. Somebody has to, it can never be 50-50 where, it's like, well, come toe that line, you meet me there and I'll meet you there. Sometimes we're going to have to cross the other side to be, that's the space that law enforcement is in. It is our charge now, especially as believing law enforcement officers, to cross a little bit more. And it's going to be 70-30, is it 80-20, so that we do a little bit more to bridge gaps that are so broken. And I don't think we're going to see any inlets until we show our hand at this point. I think that's the space we're in, and the communities. While we have supporters, it's the ones that are broken that we're here. And so I think it's important that we do our best to be able to cross the line and to bridge great bridges more than any time than before.
I appreciate you all so very much. We talked last time about a Christian Peace Officers Association of some sort. Doesn't have to be more than just that, just a title and group of officers that want to come together for a level of conversation and fellowship. I'd like to see that happen. I'm not an officer. I could be your chaplain. How's that? But
hired.
I would like you all to seriously consider that. Not just, oh yeah, that's a good idea, but okay, if it's a good idea, how do we do that? And what does that look like? And maybe it's just inviting two people to come to a Zoom conversation to have just that, a conversation. How can we be better Christ followers? And if I'm a better Christ follower, then necessarily I'm going to be a better husband, wife, uncle, aunt, and police officer. If I'm a better Christ follower, I will. So I'd like to pursue that if you all are willing to do that. And I don't know how that will evolve. And then also the follow-up conversation that I would like to have with this group and the legal profession, if you will, the lawyers. And so that will be in the weeks to come. So consider all of that. Thank you to our audience too that are viewing our podcast, and invite you to share it and send us your comments and questions, info@citychurchsac.org. And so with that, again, Brent, Todd, Kionna, thank you so much. And until we communicate again, which will be very soon. So blessings, be safe, and we love you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, thank you.